All right, boys and girls, so we're going to move on to Chapter 1, Lesson 2. Please make sure you're following along. We're going to start on page 13, then we're going to skip a couple pages and move straight to pages 16 and 17. And the focus is understanding a method that scientists use called the scientific method. We'll go back to the other pages we skip at a later date. There's a reason I do that. So we're going to continue talking about what it takes to be a good scientist. So page 13. Scientific investigation usually begins with an observation. Someone observes that cars with a certain shape are more fuel efficient. Scientists then ask a question about their observation and collect data to answer their question. One important way to find reliable answers is to do an experiment. An experiment is the use of scientific methods to test your hypothesis. Remember that a hypothesis is a statement of what you think will happen in an investigation. There is no single scientific method for finding answers. Biologists study living things with different methods than astronomers use to study the stars. For both types of scientists, however, it is important to observe, collect information, test ideas, make predictions, and share their findings with other scientists who can disagree or confirm their findings. However, it is not always possible to manipulate variables in a way that can answer scientific questions. Sometimes you have to design an investigation to test your hypothesis without doing a controlled experiment. In addition to controlled experiments, 3 types of investigation that scientists use are models, surveys, and sampling. These often help scientists test their hypotheses. So if we move to page 16, we're going to be focusing a lot on this process that scientists use called the scientific method. Page 16, steps for investigation. Scientists use scientific methods as they work in many different fields of science. Scientific methods are organized ways to answer questions and solve problems. There's also ways of discovering cause and effects. Scientific methods can include the steps shown here. Scientists might not use all the steps. They might use the steps in this order. They might not use the steps in this order. You will often use scientific methods when you do experiments and projects. First thing scientists do is ask a question. You might ask a question about something you're observing. Then you state your hypothesis. Remember, it is a possible answer to the question you ask. A hypothesis must be testable. It should be written in that if, then, because form. After you've come up with what you think will happen and why, here's a very difficult concept. Identify and control your variables. From a hypothesis, a scientist can identify the variables. A variable is something that can change in a test. An independent variable is one that you can control. A dependent variable changes when an independent variable changes. A simple investigation should test only one variable at a time. If a scientist is testing a river for pollution, all of the water samples must be taken at the same time each day and at the same place and depth in the river. If these samples are not taken the same way each time, the samples may give confusing results. Remember, for a fair test, choose one variable to change. Keep all of the other variables the same. Be sure to have a control or a control group. A control group is a standard against which change is measured. In an experiment, the experimental group is the same as the control group except for one factor that has been changed. We will go way more in depth on variables that I have PowerPoints and notes to go. Okay, so if we move to page 17, the next steps of our scientific method is next to make a plan to test that hypothesis. Then you're going to actually test your hypothesis, which is a nice way of saying to do your experiment. Then you'll collect, record, and interpret your observations as you do your experiment. And in the end, state your conclusion. You want to do at least 3 to 5 times to make sure you have consistent results. But we will spend time talking about these steps. I just wanted to kind of break down and you get familiar with the steps scientists use. But I'll be spending time on variables. I'll have separate notes and worksheets for you to do there and separate additional notes on the steps of the scientific method. So if I rushed, I will definitely be going more in depth